Hello, I am the podcaster named Josh Bloom, writing to you today from the P, where a lovely elderly couple who I held the door for is now coughing uncontrollably. I should clarify, it is just the man who is coughing uncontrollably, not the woman. I should also clarify that now that he has stopped coughing, he is complaining that men who were born with a penis should just accept it because that is what you were given at birth. He said this with great enthusiasm as the wife kept her head down in what to me looked like shame, but could actually just be apathy. This is to say, maybe I should not have held the door for them, but I am glad I did, because it is everyone's right to spend lunchtime complaining about a stranger's penis if they wish. I want to apologize to you for using the word penis in the intro of this show. Upon reflection, I actually took a 10-minute break between when I wrote that and now. I do not think it is the most welcoming way to open a podcast. If I heard the word penis used so liberally at the start of a show, I would wonder what kind of show it was, and unless I was in the right mood, I would likely tune out. So I am offering a thanks, along with my apology, because you're still here. While I was gone, I spent a few minutes chatting with my conservative friend here at the P about the 2,000 armed National Guards that are currently occupying Washington, D.C. He gave me a perspective that I hadn't thought of, and that's why I brought it up. I will elaborate on this in next week's podcast that will not include the word penis. Speaking of next week's podcast, I kept my promise and made it out to see the new Spike Lee film starring Denzel Washington called Highest to Lowest, and I am already 3,000 words into a review of it, which I will publish on Substack. I will also voice it for a podcast episode and post it as part of my Come See With Me video series on YouTube, which will include my tips and tricks on acquiring free McMuffins. I also explain what happened when I unexpectedly ran into my brother, who is not currently speaking to me, but ironically paid for the movie that I am reviewing. Isn't life crazy that way? I am excited to get back to offering additional content. Speaking of additional content, work on the second draft of my book is humming along. It is not easy, but it is easier than the first draft. My subjects keep offering additional material, some of which is too good not to include, so I have been working it in. I am also working with my editor to caption photos, which is its own creative challenge. Let me send him an email right now so he knows I have been working. Okay, I'm back. It was very interesting as I began to write the Spike Lee movie review yesterday because I could tell that I was composing it with an even more free-form stream of consciousness than before. I was working from notes that I took during the film, as I usually do, of course, but I had even more trust in writing whatever came to mind off of them. Last week when I told you about having lunch with my very real cousin, who very much still exists, I did talk about how generous it was of him to pay for my lunch because of my self-imposed state of poverty, but I didn't talk about the insanity I am seeing when it comes to the price of lunch. I will get into some details on the podcast this week, but just to mention it here up top, we are now at the point where buying a few fried chicken fingers requires one to consider making a chicken finger budget beforehand. Perhaps my cousin can fly back out here sometime soon from Portland in accordance with my chicken finger cravings. He is a good dude. Let's see how good he really is. One more reminder that while there is no Buy Me a Chicken Finger website, there is a Buy Me a Coffee website, and I am more than happy to accept coffee in place of chicken. You can find me at buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. A mere $3 will change my life. if you have ever felt like, shit, I would love to just change someone's life for $3 and be done with it, that is exactly the chance I am offering you now. Often, when we change someone's life, we have to hear about it from that person forever. Like, thank you so much for changing my life. They say it all the time. It makes you want to change their life back so they will just leave you alone. That won't happen with me. I promise. Spend the $3 and you will never hear about it again. This is episode 45 of the Josh Bloom is very embarrassed for saying penis like some vulgar vulgarian, even though it was really the old man at the P he held the door for who started it, and Josh was only illustrating his advocacy for trans rights podcast, which our LGBTQIA+ friends know as the Josh Bloom Podcast. It is the latest edition of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, days 208 through 214. This week on the show, don't forget to listen to the end for chicken fingers talk. But first, on day 208, I have to admit how embarrassing it is to be a U.S. citizen as I watch the leader of the Trump administration be humiliated in real time by Vladimir Putin in Alaska. I sound frustrated as I beg his supporters to take a look in the mirror and consider turning their back on stupidity, and then I realize I am just being stupid myself to even ask. I don't remember the cartoon Ren and Stimpy much, but I remembered that I liked it, and I also remembered that Ren used to call Stimpy an idiot. You can guess how that reference came up. On day 209, I clap back at a commenter named Craig, whose cheerleading reminds me of Kirsten Dunst in the film Bring It On, which I never even saw, but Craig's pom-pom shaking was so strong that it shook loose a memory that I never even had. The point on this day was to recognize that the days of acquiescing to the shamelessness, immorality, and lawlessness of the Trump administration may be reaching an end. I guess I just realized that the title of the movie that I never saw is prescient. Bring it on! Day 210 is the day before the leader of the Trump administration follows up on his Putin meeting by meeting with the Ukrainian president in what I now call the Golden Office. If you haven't seen a photo of what the Oval Office looks like now, it may shock you. It is now almost a week later, and Russia continues to relentlessly bomb Ukrainian civilians. The war that the leader of the Trump administration promised to end on day 1 is still claiming lives on day 210. Par for the course for a guy who constantly cheats on the course and has never shot par. On day 211, which just happens to represent my birthday of February 11, and is why I take a moment to mention that I do not like the song Birthday by the Beatles, I also must reprimand another commenter who defended Vladimir Putin, an indicted war criminal responsible for tens of thousands of deaths. This is also the day of the Golden Office meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine, which is only happening because the leader of the Trump administration is mad that Barack Obama has a Nobel Peace Prize and he doesn't. Day 212 is dedicated to explaining right from wrong. Unfortunate as it is that such a thing would have to be explained. For instance, you never hear the left talking about taking their country back, for example, like you hear it from the right. This is because the left knows that the country isn't ours. It belongs to all of us, if anything. I recall the relationship between Jeff Spicoli and Mr. Hand. Do you remember what Jeff called Mr. Hand when Mr. Hand ripped up Jeff's card? It is another word for the word I am not saying. I will remind you, and like with Ren of Ren and Stimpy, I think you know who I am referring to. Do you believe in gosh? On day 213, we discuss the people who believe that saying gosh instead of God actually does anything. Of course, I must acknowledge the late, great comedic genius Mitch Hedberg for coming up with that phrase. This thought came about because I saw a commenter criticizing a child for saying, "Oh my God." My reaction to that is, I hope that commenters' children, if they have any, will somehow find a way to establish their own beliefs instead of having religion forced on them. Day 214 is Chicken Fingers Day. Speaking of believing, can you believe that if you want to order an appetizer of chicken fingers with a soda and tip, you better have more than $20 on you? Yes, that is the economy we are living in now, thanks to the leader of the Trump administration. I point out that Kanye West doesn't have to worry, not because he doesn't have the money, but because he prefers fish sticks, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Kanye fish sticks. You will realize that I have brought this week's intro full circle. Here is another reminder to go over to my YouTube channel to watch a compilation of all of this week's daily TikTok posts. A link is in the show notes. I would be very happy if you would subscribe there too. Subscribe everywhere. I mean, come on. I am cranking out the content nonstop, and all I am asking for is some clicks. Oh, I am also asking for $3. I don't want to be called out for lying when I was already so vulgar so far. You can also reach all of my social media by visiting superjews.com. That's superjerjews.com. Thanks as always for listening. And now let's get into 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. By the way, I am writing from home now and am no longer surrounded by coughing elderly transphobes. Thanks for your concern. I will be back shortly. Day 208 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Look, I save my uplifting commentary for 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, but since the timing is right, as the leader of the Trump administration is in the air on his way back to Washington, D.C. after being humiliated once again by Vladimir Putin, I have to admit it is just so embarrassing to be a citizen in a country that would vote someone who is this stupid into the presidency twice. And it's not even because of how personally stupid he is. It is because the people who voted for him are so stupid. Will you people who voted for this moron please get up tomorrow morning and look in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm tired of being stupid. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm dumb and I don't want to be so dumb. So I'm going to do something about it because my brain has a capacity that I am not using. And one of the reasons you know I'm not using it is because I voted for Donald Trump. I hear Ren from Ren and Stimpy in my mind when I say this idiot flew to Alaska to invite a murderous dictator war criminal onto U.S. soil, and God knows how much money was spent getting him there. Just know, dummies, that when you are getting up and voting for this idiot, you are basically saying, here, Daddy, here's my wallet, here's everything, take it all, Daddy, take every little penny, Daddy. That is what you're saying because that is what he's doing with it. He's going to build a ballroom. And you know who's not going to go in that ballroom? You're not going to go in that ballroom. You ain't going anywhere near that ballroom. And if you try to go near that ballroom, you would be taken care of. And you could scream, but I voted for Daddy. I voted for Daddy. This idiot spent all that taxpayer money to go to Alaska to do nothing. To do nothing except invite a murderous dictator onto U.S. soil and have him laugh in his face and lie and say they're making a deal when you know there is no deal because the only deal for Putin is to take back Ukraine. That's it. People like Putin must be defeated. That is the only deal. The fact that this idiot thinks he can get the Nobel Peace Prize, which is just another thing that he wants to put on his gaudy gold fireplace mantle because Barack Obama has one, is just ridiculous. Get up tomorrow, look in the mirror, make an evaluation, and start to ignore the Trump administration. Day 209 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Craig says, "Go, Trump, go," which makes Craig sound like a cheerleader, kind of like Kirsten Dunst in the film Bring It On, for example. I think of Craig on the sidelines next to the red carpet that the leader of the Trump administration rolled out for a murderous dictator who has indiscriminately ended the lives of millions of people at this point, including countless women and children. I see Craig jumping up and down with pom-poms next to his daddy Trump as Vladimir Putin walks towards them with glee, knowing that he will have to put very little effort into pulling the wool over the eyes of the leader of the Trump administration. Now, Craig might mean "go, Trump, go" in a way that I mean it, which is "go, Trump, go." Of course, that advice will not be heeded because when we are dealing with someone like the leader of the Trump administration, who I believe takes advantage of others, steps on others' freedoms to enrich himself, and looks down upon every other human being with disdain, then I would not expect someone like that to leave office before their time and, frankly, to leave office after their time. Which is why I think people like Gavin Newsom, for example, are finally stepping up and realizing that the days of acquiescing to the will of people with no shame, no morality, and no ethics is over. People who say things like "go, Trump, go" are unfortunately showing a lack of cognitive ability to truly understand what someone like this is doing to the population. There are people who support the leader of the Trump administration who might only be looking at him from a purely conservative policy angle and are living a life where they do not pay much attention otherwise. I get that. What I'm talking about is the people who don't actually even care about the policies other than how the policies are cruel to other people, because those supporters of the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration are people who enjoy the idea of a leader who will take out their grievances, take out their anger, take out their hatred of their own life on other people who are just trying to enjoy theirs. And so when I see in my mind Craig, you on the sidelines in Alaska with your pom-poms and short skirt, cheering on Vladimir Putin as he walks down the red carpet after another day of ending the lives of so many Ukrainians, I just think to myself, well, thank you for the motivation for me to continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 210 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name is Josh Bloom, and you know who I am? I'm a guy who is just trying to help myself. Tomorrow, Vladimir Putin will use the leader of the Trump administration as a tool. Tonight, I am thinking about Vladimir Zelensky because tomorrow he will be visiting Mar-a-Lago, D.C., aka the White House, to meet with the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. Now, if you remember the last time Vladimir Zelensky visited the Golden Oval, which was much less golden at the time, Zelensky was ambushed by the leader of the Trump administration and his first flunky, J.D. Vance. In light of the leader of the Trump administration getting rolled by Vladimir Putin in Alaska at the end of last week, we can likely expect the leader of the Trump administration to insist that Vladimir Zelensky do just like the leader of the Trump administration does and roll the fuck over. He will likely insist on Putin's behalf that Ukraine give up land in exchange for a flimsy promise of peace offered by a murderous liar. I don't see how this is possible. To do this would be a violation of boundaries, and not just land boundaries, but boundaries of propriety, boundaries of humanity, boundaries of morality. This is a war that was started by Russia. an act of aggression by a war criminal, by a dictator, by an ethically bankrupt human being, just like the leader of the Trump administration, except much more intelligent than the leader of the Trump administration, which is how Putin will be able to use the leader of the Trump administration as a tool tomorrow in trying to get Vladimir Zelensky to give up Ukrainian land to Russia. The reason this is a violation of the boundaries I have stated is because not only does Putin have no rights to this land and has seen to the deaths of tens of thousands of Ukrainians in his illegal pursuit of this land, but because by attempting to get Ukraine to agree to this unjust resolution, he has offered no resolution at all. To agree to this quote unquote solution only emboldens the bully to do more bullying. This is not the kind of message to pass down to the next generation. So keep your eye on tomorrow's meeting, but ignore the Trump administration. Day 211 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I think we've established that. I had a commenter on another platform defending Vladimir Putin. Isn't that nice on day 211 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration? Now, 211 is an interesting number for me because 211 represents February 11, which is my birthday. So on a day that represents my birthday, which reminds me of the Beatles song Birthday, which is not a Beatles song I like, let me follow up on this comment I don't like and yesterday's post that prompted it. I am not a reporter, but there are some things going on right now that I take a personal interest in, such as Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit today to the Golden Office and what I believe is happening there. First, the leader of the Trump administration is desperate for that Nobel Peace Prize because Barack Obama has one. And if Barack Obama has one, then the leader of the Trump administration wants one. And secondly, because the leader of the Trump administration was humiliated by Vladimir Putin last Friday, which was reported on by the media, including Fox, he now feels he must align himself with Zelensky more than he has in the past, such as earlier this year when he basically led him into an ambush in the early Golden Office days. He now feels that treating President Zelensky with more empathy, and when I say that word, it only applies to the leader of the Trump administration in terms of appearance, because he is not an empathetic dude. He feels treating Zelensky with the appearance of empathy allows the leader of the Trump administration to get back at Vladimir Putin for humiliating him. So that is what is going on. He wants the Peace Prize and he wants to throw a tantrum because of the way Putin treated him. That is why he's doing what he's doing. Once again, you must look at all behaviors by the leader of the Trump administration through the lens of what's good for the leader of the Trump administration, because that's all he cares about. Sometimes within that, there is accidentally something good that can come of it. And what could be good that comes of this is eventual peace for Ukraine, right? If you are one of those people who has made pro-Putin comments, just know that after their meeting on Friday in Alaska, Putin's strike killed more civilians in Ukraine, including children. So when you are defending that monster, just know that you are a monster who defends a monster. Give that some consideration. I'll be over here ignoring the Trump administration. Day 212 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just learning about Cuba, having some food, and I'm just trying to help myself. The difference between the right and the left is the difference between the right and the wrong. You will hear the right say the same when you hear the right say they will take their country back. They believe that the left wants to suppress and oppress their way of life, and this is the argument they will use to justify their behavior. I am talking about the most extreme examples, of course, because when I am out and about in my very mixed community, people seem to get along just fine for now. Still, I do not hear the left saying something as silly as they want to take their country back. Because the left does not seek to suppress and oppress the people they do not like, the left seeks to be left alone. If you don't understand another person's way of life and you don't want to expand your psychological, emotional, and social vocabulary, then you could just move the fuck on. But if you're a big baby and it makes you feel good to suppress and oppress, which is a hallmark of this type of hypocritical, hateful person, you are going to do this whether we want you to or not. What we do then is make those attempts ineffective. And at this time, the way we make those attempts ineffective in our everyday existence is to ignore those attempts and continue to live a mindful, optimistic, and hopeful life. I have said all along that the reason I do not like the leader of the Trump administration is because I feel like the leader of the Trump administration is a dick. You know how Jeff Spicoli called Mr. Hand a dick for sending him to the front office in the film Fast Times at Ridgemont High? In this case, the leader of the Trump administration would be Mr. Hand. Or actually, Mr. Small Hand. I grew up in New York, and we've always known that about the leader of the Trump administration here, but I have no interest in putting any time, thought, or tenacity behind trying to keep him from his pension for being a prick. That's how he rolls, and that's why his fans love him. Live and let live is a saying that I grew up with and speaks to my disinterest in retaliation. But I will add and elaborate on it by saying live and let the left live by ignoring the Trump administration. Day 213 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. Here, you throw this away. I'm just trying to help myself. I want to talk today about forced religion. I saw a comment section where a child was being criticized for saying, "Oh my God," instead of "Oh my gosh." I don't know if you are familiar with the late great comedic genius Mitch Hedberg. He had an album called Do You Believe in Gosh? The reason it was called Do You Believe in Gosh is because Mitch is criticizing the hypocrisy of saying gosh instead of God, because gosh means God. If you're saying, "Oh my gosh," you're saying, "Oh my God." Now, there are some people who believe, well, if you're not saying, "Oh my God," then you're not taking the Lord's name in vain. But what about Jesus Christ? Do people say Jesus Crosh? Do they say Jeebus Christ? No, Jeebus Crosh? The point is, it's the thought that counts, and you thought God. Exactly. It makes no sense. Forced religion. The attempt to make us believe when we won't, the attempt to make us have faith when we can't, the attempt to control our lives when we don't obey. Religion's a made-up thing. I don't mind if people have religion, if that's what's going to get you from the beginning to the end, good for you. Everyone has their way, but it's a made-up thing. Consciousness is a made-up thing. Our perception of existence, it's a made-up thing. The only thing you're gonna get out of life is the little bit of time that quote-unquote you are quote-unquote here. Try to enjoy it. That is what ignoring the Trump administration is all about. At this point, there are people wasting their entire life worshiping this crumbling orange fool. Meanwhile, he has spent his entire life taking advantage of the people who spent their entire life worshiping this crumbling orange fool. Do not criticize children for saying, "Oh my God." Let them figure out for themselves what they believe and offer support as they do. If there ever was a God, God would be saying, "Hey, thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it. Word up." And if God were ever going to issue some kind of invocation, the invocation he would invoke would be ignore the Trump administration. Day 214 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name is Josh Bloom. I am just trying to help myself. How much are your chicken fingers? I spend quite a bit of time here on 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration talking about how when I am out and about in my very mixed local community where there are plenty of supporters of the leader of the Trump administration, everything seems fine. Real life is not the internet. Most people out there just vote party line and don't pay much attention. I've done it. I go in and I vote for Kamala Harris, but way down ballot, I'll just check Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. So look, so far, what the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration are doing is not touching our regular lives. Yet. I don't deal with things until things get real. So let me ask you something. How much are your chicken fingers? I went to a local diner last week with my cousin, a diner, not some special fucking diner, just a diner, the local diner. I want to tell you about prices because these prices, I thought I was looking at a misprint. Chicken fingers, an appetizer, chicken fingers, appetizer, $16.99. Now, Kanye West wouldn't eat here because Kanye West loves fish sticks, and they didn't have fish sticks, but they did have the standard bacon cheeseburger with fries. Pretty standard diner thing, right? That's what you get when you go to the diner, right? A bacon cheeseburger and fries, $18.99. That's without a soda and tips, so maybe $25 by the time you're out of there. Okay, so maybe find something a little cheaper. How about just grilled cheese and fries? That's a couple pieces of bread with some butter, a couple pieces of cheese, and some fried potatoes, right? Sandwich, $8.99, fries, $7.99. Now, if that isn't touching your regular life, I don't know what is. On this day, it did not touch mine because my cousin was in from out of town and he was a gracious guy who just happened to buy me lunch. But frankly, when he suggested later, like, oh, we could have gone to this Italian restaurant down the street, I would have been embarrassed for him to pay for me there because who knows what the hell that number would have been. What I'm trying to point out is that in our daily lives, people are still getting along. But when prices go up, people's stress level goes up, and then their tempers go up. I guess the next time I go out to a diner, I'll just have to eat lunch in my imagination because of the very real inflation being caused by the Trump administration.
Hey, it's Josh. Just hanging out here enjoying some chicken fingers. Not really. I don't have a deep fryer, but now that I say that, perhaps I should finance a deep fryer and go into the apparently very lucrative chicken finger business. Last week, I updated you on the deep cleaning of my apartment, and I am both ashamed and proud of the fact that it is still going on. Don't get the wrong impression. I don't live like a slob, but if you're going to do the job, you've got to do the job, and the job takes a lot of energy and time. For instance, I had to touch up some paint that the workers hired by the super left on my entranceway wall after they finished fixing the ceiling after solving a small water leak above my front door. This counts as cleaning in my world. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app and leave a comment saying that you like the show. Don't forget to follow, and as always, I would love it if you would tell a friend about the show. My thoughts this week are related to the economy. You could say, hey, have you heard about the price of chicken fingers lately? And when they say no, you could respond, oh, well, then I have a show for you. It's called the Josh Bloom Podcast, and Josh Bloom shares his personal experiences with the current chicken finger inflation situation. If your friend isn't convinced at that point,
I would be absolutely shocked. But you could say, plus Josh doesn't say penis. That might just seal the deal. Lastly, visit me everywhere for everything by going to superjews.com. That's superjerjews.com for links to all of my social media, and visit superjews.substack.com to subscribe to my Substack, which contains all of my long-form writing. Subscriptions are free, or for a small monthly donation, you can support my work. It helps a lot. Thanks again for listening. I will see you next week.